The Frog King, or Iron Henry. In old times, when wishing still helped one, there lived a king whose daughters were all beautiful. But the youngest was so beautiful that the sun itself, which has seen so much, was astonished whenever it shone in her face. Near the king's castle lay a great dark forest, and in the forest, under an old lime tree, was a well. When the day was very warm, the king's child went out into the forest and sat down by the side of the cool fountain. And when she was bored, she took a golden ball, threw it up high, and caught it. This ball was her favorite plaything. Now it so happened that one day the princess's golden ball did not fall into her little hand which she held up for it, but onto the ground, and rolled straight into the water. The princess followed it with her eyes, but the ball disappeared, and the well was deep, so deep that the bottom could not be seen. She began to cry, and cried louder and louder, and as she cried, a voice called to her. "What troubles you, king's daughter? You weep so that even a stone would pity you." She looked around to see where the voice had come from, and there she saw a frog, stretching his thick, ugly head out of the water. "Ah, old water splasher, is it you?" she said. "I am crying for my golden ball which has fallen into the well." "Be quiet," answered the frog. "I can help you. But what will you give me if I bring your plaything up again?" "Oh, yes," she said. "I promise you everything you want. Only bring me the ball." But she thought, "What nonsense he talks. He sits in the water with the other frogs and croaks. How can he possibly be anyone's companion?" As soon as the frog had received her promise, he put his head under the water and dove to the bottom. After a while he came back up, holding the golden ball in his mouth, and threw it on the grass. The king's daughter was delighted to see her pretty plaything again, picked it up and ran away with it. "Wait, wait!" cried the frog. "Take me with you. I cannot run like you." But what did it help that he croaked after her as loudly as he could? She did not listen, but hurried home and soon forgot the poor frog, who was forced to go back to his well. The next day, when the king and all his court were sitting at dinner, the princess was eating from her little golden plate when, plitch-platch, something came creeping up the marble stairs. When it reached the top, it knocked at the door and cried, "King's daughter, youngest, open the door for me." She ran to see who was outside. When she opened it and saw the frog, she slammed the door in great hurry and sat down at the table again, full of fear. The king saw clearly that her heart was beating violently. "My child," he said, "what are you afraid of? Is there a giant outside who wants to carry you away?" "Oh, no," she answered. "It is no giant, but a disgusting frog." "What does the frog want from you?" "Ah, dear father, yesterday when I was sitting by the well, my golden ball fell into the water. And because I cried so, the frog brought it back up again. But he insisted that I promise him he could be my companion. I never thought he would come out of the water, but now he is outside and wants to come in to me." Just then it knocked a second time and cried, "King's daughter, youngest, open the door for me." "Have you forgotten what you promised me? By the cool waters of the well, under the lime tree's shady spell?" Then the king said, "What you have promised you must keep. Go and let him in." She went and opened the door. The frog hopped in and followed her to her chair. There he said, "Lift me up beside you." She did not want to, but the king ordered her to obey. When the frog sat at the table, he said, "Push your little golden plate nearer to me, so that we may eat together." She did it, but everyone could see she did not do it willingly. The frog ate heartily, and the princess's plate soon became empty. At last he said, "I am tired. Carry me into your little bedroom and make your little silk bed ready. We will lie down and go to sleep." The king's daughter began to cry, for she was afraid of the cold frog. She shuddered to touch him. But the king grew angry and said, "You helped him when you were in trouble. You must not despise him now." So she picked the frog up with 2 fingers, carried him upstairs, and set him in a corner. But when she was in bed, he came creeping up and said, "I am tired. I want to sleep as well as you. Lift me up into your bed, or I will tell your father." At this, she became so angry that she picked him up and threw him with all her might against the wall, saying, "Now you will be quiet, you horrible frog." But the moment he fell to the ground, he was no frog but a young prince with beautiful, friendly eyes. He told her that he had been enchanted by a wicked witch, and no one could have set him free except she. Tomorrow they would go together to his kingdom. Then they fell asleep. The next morning a splendid carriage arrived, drawn by 8 white horses, with white feathers on their heads and golden chains. Behind the carriage stood Iron Henry, the prince's faithful servant. Henry had been so grieved when his master was changed into a frog that he had clasped 3 iron bands around his own heart to prevent it from breaking with sorrow. Now the prince was free again. Henry helped him and the princess into the carriage and mounted behind. His joy was so great that the bands on his heart snapped one after another. As they drove on, the prince heard a cracking sound. He turned and cried, "Henry, the carriage is breaking." "No, master, not the carriage. It is a band from my heart, which was bound in my grief when you were a frog and imprisoned in the well." Again and again as they drove, there was a cracking sound, and each time another band broke from Henry's heart. Thus they arrived happily in the prince's kingdom, where they lived long and joyfully. Cat and Mouse in Partnership. A cat had made acquaintance with a mouse, and had spoken so much of the great love and friendship she felt for her, that at length the mouse agreed that they should live and keep house together. "But we must provide for winter, or else we shall suffer hunger," said the cat. "You, little mouse, cannot venture everywhere, or you will be caught in a trap some day." The good advice was followed, and a pot of fat was bought, but they did not know where to put it. At length, after long consultation, the cat said, "I know of no place where it will be better stored than in the church, for no one dares take anything away from there. We will set it beneath the altar and not touch it till we are really in need of it." So the pot was placed in safety. But soon afterwards the cat was seized by a great longing for it, and said to the mouse, "I want to tell you something, little mouse. My cousin has brought a little son into the world and has asked me to be godmother. He is white with brown spots, and I am to hold him over the font at the christening. Let me go out today, and you look after the house by yourself." "Yes, yes," answered the mouse. "Go by all means, and if you get anything very good to eat, think of me. I should so like a drop of sweet red christening wine." But all this was untrue. The cat had no cousin, and had not been asked to be godmother. She went straight to the church, crept to the pot of fat, and licked the top off. Then she took a walk on the roofs of the town, thought over her situation, and stretched herself in the sun. When she reached home, the mouse asked, "Well, you certainly have had a merry day." "Oh, pretty well," answered the cat. "And what name did they give the child?" "Top off," said the cat, quite coolly. "Top off," cried the mouse. "That is a very odd and uncommon name. Is it a usual one in your family?" "What does that matter?" said the cat. "It is no worse than Crumb Stealer, as your godchildren are called." Not long after this, the cat was again overcome by a longing. She said to the mouse, "You must do me a favor and once more manage the house alone for a day. I have been asked a second time to stand godmother, and as the child has a white ring around its neck, I cannot refuse." The good mouse consented, but the cat crept under the town wall to the church and ate half of the pot of fat. "Nothing tastes better," she said, "than what one eats oneself," and she was very much pleased with her day's work. When she came home, the mouse asked, "And what was this child called?" "Half Gone," answered the cat. "Half Gone? What are you saying? I never heard the name in my life. I'll wager it is not in the calendar." Soon the cat's mouth once more watered for the delicacy. "Good things always come in threes," said the cat to the mouse. "I am again to stand godmother. The child is quite black and has white paws, but not a single white hair on its body. This only happens once in 2 years, so pray excuse me today." "Top Off, Half Gone," repeated the mouse. "They are such curious names. They make me very thoughtful." "Oh, you sit at home in your dark gray fur coat and long tail and are filled with fancies. That comes of not going out in the daytime." The mouse cleaned and tidied the house and waited for the cat's return, but she did not come back till evening. The mouse had once more asked, "And the child's name this time?" "Clean Gone," answered the cat. "Clean Gone," repeated the mouse. "I do not like that name at all. Clean Gone. What can it mean?" She shook her head, curled herself up, and went to sleep. After this, no one again asked the cat to be godmother. But when the winter had come, and there was no longer anything to be found outside, the mouse thought of their store of fat, and said, "Come, cat, we will fetch our pot of fat." "Yes," answered the cat, "you will enjoy that as much as you enjoy sticking your tongue out of the window." Off they set on their way, but when they arrived, the pot of fat was still in its place, but empty. "Alas," said the mouse, "now I see what has happened. It has all come out. Oh, cat, you are a false friend. First, Top Off, then Half Gone, then—" "Will you hold your tongue?" cried the cat. "One word more, and I will eat you, too." Clean Gone was already on the poor mouse's tongue, and scarcely had she spoken it before the cat sprang on her, seized her, and swallowed her whole. Such is the way of the world. Our Lady's Child. There was once a poor woodman and his wife, who had only one child, a little daughter. They were so poor that they had no longer daily bread, and knew not how to provide for her. One morning the woodman went out anxiously into the forest, and when he was cutting wood there, a tall, beautiful woman appeared to him, with a crown of shining stars on her head, who said to him, "I am the Virgin Mary, the mother of the Christ child. You are poor and needy. Bring your child to me, and I will take her with me, be her mother, and care for her." The woodman obeyed, brought his child, and gave her to the Virgin Mary, who took her up to heaven. There the child fared well. She ate sugar cakes and drank sweet milk. Her clothes were of gold, and the little angels played with her. When she was 14 years old, the Virgin Mary called her one day and said, "Dear child, I am going to make a long journey,
and I leave you in charge of the 13 keys of the heavenly kingdom. 12 of them you may open, and behold the glory which is within. But the 13th, which this little key belongs to, is forbidden you. Beware of opening it, for that would bring misfortune." The girl promised to obey, and the Virgin Mary went on her journey. Not long afterwards, the girl began to look at the dwellings of heaven. Every day she opened one, until she had opened the 12, and in each she saw one of the apostles sitting in splendor, and rejoiced in all the glory and magnificence. The little angels who always accompanied her rejoiced with her. Now only the forbidden door remained. She felt a great desire to know what was hidden behind it, and she said to the angels, "I will not open it entirely, and will not go inside, but I will unlock it just so much that we can see a little through the opening." "Oh, no," said the angels, "that would be a sin, and would bring misfortune." She was silent, but the desire in her heart was not stilled, and left her no peace. Once, when the angels had all gone out, she thought, "Now I am quite alone, and could peep inside. No one would know." She found the key, and when she had found it, she put it in the lock, and turned it once round. Then the door sprang open, and she saw the Trinity sitting in fire and splendor. She remained standing there a short time, gazing at everything in astonishment. Then she touched the fire a little with her finger, and the finger was quite golden. Then a great fear seized her. She slammed the door to violently and ran away. The terror would not leave her. Her heart beat violently and would not be quiet, and the gold also remained on her finger and would not come off, however much she rubbed and washed it. Not long afterwards, the Virgin Mary returned from her journey. She called the girl to her and asked for the keys of heaven. When the girl gave her the bunch, she looked at her eyes and said, "Have you not opened the 13th door?" "No," she answered. Then the Virgin Mary laid her hand on the girl's heart and felt that it beat violently, and perceived that she had disobeyed her command and opened the door. Then she asked her once more, "Did you not open the door?" "No," she answered a second time. Then the Virgin Mary saw the golden finger which had touched the heavenly fire, and knew that she had committed the sin, and said for the third time, "Did you not do it?" "No," answered the girl for the third time. Then said the Virgin Mary, "You have not obeyed me, and besides that you have lied. You are no longer worthy to be in heaven." She sank into a deep sleep, and when she awoke, she lay in a wilderness on the earth. She wished to cry out, but she could not utter a sound. She tried to move herself, but she could not, for she was shut up in a hollow tree. Only one opening remained, through which she could see a little daylight. There she sat for a long time, until her hair had grown long and covered her all over like a garment, and her nails had grown like birds' claws. At length a king happened to pass through the forest hunting, and saw a strange creature sitting in the tree. It had long hair, which fell down on all sides, and it was golden, and glittered splendidly in the sun. He ordered it to be brought down, and it was a beautiful maiden. He took her home with him to his castle, and as she was mute, he treated her kindly, and loved her with all his heart, and married her. After a year she brought a child into the world. Then the Virgin Mary appeared to her in her sleep, and said, "If you will confess your fault, and acknowledge that you opened the forbidden door, I will give you back your speech, and take away the punishment. But if you persist in denying your sin, I will take away your newborn child." When she awoke, she would not confess, and lost the child. The second year she had another child, and the Virgin Mary appeared again and spoke as before. But the girl still persisted in her denial, and the Virgin Mary took away the child. The third year she had another child, and the Virgin Mary appeared again and said, "Follow me," and led her to heaven, and showed her the 12 opened doors, and said, "From these you saw the glory of heaven, but the 13th which you opened, see what you did." She showed her the finger which was burned by the fire, and said, "3 times you have lied to me, and 3 times you have denied your guilt." Then the girl said, "Yes, I did it," and immediately her speech was restored to her, and her innocence and happiness were given back to her. Then the Virgin Mary returned her children to her, and freed her from all misfortune, and she lived happily to the end of her life.
The story of the youth who went forth to learn what fear was. There was once a father who had 2 sons. The elder was clever and sensible and could do everything, but the younger was stupid and could neither learn nor understand anything. And when people saw him, they said, "That fellow will give his father some trouble." When anything had to be done, it was always the elder who was forced to do it. But if his father bade him fetch anything in the night time, or go anywhere which was dark or uncanny, he answered, "Oh no, father, I cannot go there. It makes me afraid." For he was frightened at everything. But whenever stories were told by the fireside which made people's flesh creep, the younger sat and listened and said, "That does not make me afraid. I cannot shudder at that." Then his father said to him, "Hear me, you blockhead. You cannot learn or understand anything, but go out into the world and learn what it is to shudder." "Very well, father," answered the youth. "If that is all that is wanted, I will soon learn it. But it seems to me that that is a very useless art." The elder brother laughed when he heard that, and thought, "Heaven help him, how stupid he is." The father sighed and said, "You will soon learn what it is to shudder, but you will not earn your bread by it." Soon afterwards the sexton came to the house, and the father complained to him of his trouble, and told him how his youngest son was so stupid that he could neither learn nor understand anything. "Just think," said he, "when I told him to go out into the world and learn what fear was, he answered, 'If that is all that is wanted, I will soon learn it.'" "If that is what he wants," said the sexton, "let him come to me. I will soon teach him." The father was glad, for he thought the boy would thus be cured of his stupidity. The sexton took him to his house, and he had to ring the church bell. After a time, the sexton woke him up at midnight, bade him get up, go to the church tower, and ring the bell. "You will soon learn what it is to shudder," thought the sexton. The youth went up, and when he reached the top of the tower and turned around, he saw a white figure standing on the steps opposite to him. "Who is there?" cried he. But the figure made no answer and did not stir. "Give an answer or go away. You have no business here at night." The figure still remained motionless. Then the youth grew angry and said, "If you will not go away, I will throw you down." He took hold of it and pushed it with all his might, and the white figure fell down the stairs and lay at the bottom in a heap. He rang the bell, went home, and lay down again without saying a word. Next morning, the sexton's wife asked him if he knew anything about the noise in the tower during the night. "No," said he, "I rang the bell, and then I saw something white standing on the steps. I told it to speak or go away, but it did not answer, so I pushed it down and then went back to bed."
The sexton went and found that the figure was nothing more than one of his own garments, which he had hung there to dry, and he was very angry, and said to the youth, "You are the cause of my misfortune. You might have killed me. Get out of my house at once." The youth went away and went further, and came to an inn where the host wrote on a board, "If anyone can stay awake for 3 nights in the old haunted castle, he shall marry the king's daughter and inherit half the kingdom." But many had already tried it, and no one had yet succeeded. The youth read the board and said to the host, "If I may, I would like to go there." The host tried to dissuade him, but he answered, "If I am afraid, I will go home again." So he went to the king and asked permission, and the king gave it to him and said, "You may take 3 things with you into the castle, but they must be things without life." The youth said, "Then I will take a fire, a lathe, and a cutting board." He went with them to the castle, made himself a fire in one of the rooms, placed the cutting board near it, and sat down on the lathe and warmed himself. At midnight, something came and made such a noise that it seemed as if the whole castle would fall. "Ah," said he, "if you are cold, come and warm yourselves." Soon 2 great black cats sprang out with fearful leaps, seated themselves on each side of the fire, and stared at him with wild eyes. "You have fine claws," said the youth, "but wait, I will cut them off." He seized them, put their paws on the cutting board, and cut them off. Then they vanished. After that, more strange things happened. Men without heads, heads without bodies, corpses that moved, and frightful shapes appeared, but he never learned to shudder. On the 3rd night, a man taller than all the rest came, but when the youth threw him down, he turned into gold. Next morning the king came, and when he saw that the youth was still alive, he gave him his daughter and half the kingdom. But the youth said, "I still do not know what it is to shudder." After his marriage, his wife wanted to teach him, and one night when he was sleeping, she poured a bucket full of little fishes over him. Then he awoke and cried, "Ah, now I know what it is to shudder." The Wolf and the 7 Young Kids. There was once an old goat who had 7 little kids, and loved them as dearly as a mother can love her children. One day she wished to go into the forest and fetch some food, so she called all 7 to her and said, "Dear children, I have to go out into the forest. Be on your guard against the wolf. If he comes in, he will eat you all, skin, hair, and everything. The wretch often disguises himself, but you will know him at once by his rough voice and his black feet." The kids said, "Dear mother, we will take good care of ourselves. You may go away without anxiety." Then the old one bleated and went on her way with an easy mind. It was not long before someone knocked at the house door and cried, "Open the door, dear children. Your mother is here and has brought something back with her for each of you." But the little kids knew by the rough voice that it was the wolf. "We will not open the door," cried they. "You are not our mother. She has a soft, pleasant voice, but your voice is rough. You are the wolf." Then the wolf went to a shopkeeper and bought himself a large piece of chalk, ate it, and made his voice soft. Then he came back, knocked at the door, and cried, "Open the door, dear children. Your dear little mother has come home and has brought every one of you something from the forest." But the wolf had laid his black paws against the window, and the kids saw them and cried, "We will not open the door. Our mother has not black feet like you. You are the wolf." Then the wolf ran to a baker and said, "I have hurt my foot. Rub some dough over it for me." The baker did so. Then the wolf ran to the miller and said, "Strew some white meal over my foot." The miller thought to himself, "The wolf wants to deceive someone," and refused. But the wolf threatened him and said, "If you do not do it, I will eat you." Then the miller was afraid and made his paw white. Yes, so are men. Now the wolf went for the third time to the house door, knocked at it, and said, "Open the door for me, children. Your dear little mother has come home and has brought every one of you something from the forest." The little kids cried, "First show us your paw, that we may know if you are our dear little mother." Then he put his paw in through the window, and when they saw that it was white, they believed all that he said, and opened the door. But who should come in but the wolf? They were frightened and wanted to hide themselves. One sprang under the table, the second into the bed, the third into the stove, the fourth into the kitchen, the fifth into the cupboard, the sixth under the wash-tub, and the seventh into the clock case. But the wolf found them all, and used no great ceremony. One after the other, he swallowed them down his throat. The youngest only, who was in the clock case, he did not find. When the wolf had satisfied his appetite, he took himself off, laid himself down under a tree in the green meadow outside, and fell asleep. Soon afterwards the old goat came home again from the forest. Ah, what a sight she saw there! The house door stood wide open. Tables, chairs, and benches were thrown down. The wash-tub lay broken to pieces. The blankets and pillows were pulled off the bed. She sought her children, but they were nowhere to be found. She called them one after another by name, but no one answered. At last, when she came to the youngest, a soft voice cried, "Dear mother, I am in the clock case." She took him out, and he told her that the wolf had eaten all the others. You may imagine how she wept over her poor children. At last, in her grief, she went out, and the youngest kid ran with her. They soon came to the meadow where the wolf lay sleeping under a tree and snoring so loudly that the branches shook. She looked at him on every side and saw that something was moving and struggling in his swollen belly. "Ah, heavens!" she said, "is it possible that my poor children, whom he has swallowed down for his supper, can still be alive?" Then she sent the kid home to fetch scissors and needle and thread. She cut open the monster's stomach, and hardly had she made one cut than one little kid thrust its head out. She cut further, and out sprang all six, one after another, and they were all still alive and had suffered no injury whatever, for in his greediness the monster had swallowed them whole. What rejoicing there was! They embraced their dear mother and danced like a tailor at his wedding. But the mother said, "Now go and look for some big stones while the wicked beast is asleep." Then the 7 kids dragged stones together with all speed and put as many of them into his stomach as they could get in. Then the mother sewed him up again so quickly and neatly that he never felt anything and did not wake up. When the wolf at last awoke, he felt thirsty and rose and went to a well to drink. But the stones in his stomach made him so unsteady that he fell in and was drowned. When the 7 kids saw that, they came running up, cried joyfully, "The wolf is dead! The wolf is dead!" and danced round the well with their mother.
Faithful John. There was once an old king who was ill and thought to himself,
"This is the deathbed on which I am lying." Then he said, "Let faithful John come to me." Faithful John was his most trusted servant, and was so called because he had served his master faithfully all his life long. When he came to the bedside, the king said, "Faithful John, my end is approaching, and I have nothing else to trouble me except my son. He is still young, and does not always know how to guide himself, and if you do not promise me to instruct him in everything, and be his foster father, I cannot close my eyes in peace." Then faithful John answered, "I will not forsake him, and will serve him faithfully, even if it should cost me my life." Then the old king said, "Now I can die in peace and comfort." And then he said further, "After my death you shall show him the whole castle, all the rooms, halls, and vaults, and all the treasures which are in them. But the last chamber in the long gallery you shall not show him, in which the picture of the princess of the golden dwelling hangs. If he sees this picture, he will fall into a violent love for her, and will faint away, and will get into great danger through her. Therefore you must guard him well from that." Faithful John once more gave his hand upon it, and the old king was silent, laid his head upon the pillow, and died. When the old king was buried, faithful John told the young king all that he had promised his father on his deathbed, and said, "I will certainly perform it, and will be faithful to you as I was to him, even if it should cost me my life." Then the mourning time was over, and faithful John said to him, "It is now time that you should see your inheritance. I will show you your paternal castle." He led him everywhere, upstairs and downstairs, and showed him all the riches and splendid rooms. One room only he did not show him, that in which hung the dangerous picture. But the picture was so placed that whenever the door was opened a little, it could be seen, and it was painted so beautifully that no one could look at it without being astonished and filled with admiration. Now the young king noticed that faithful John always passed by one door, and said, "Why do you never open this one for me?" "There is something in it," answered he, "which would frighten you." But the king replied, "I have seen the whole castle, and will know what is in it," and went and tried to open the door. Faithful John held him back and said, "I promised your father on his deathbed that you should not see what is in this room. It might bring great misfortune on you and me." But the king said, "It would bring me the greatest misfortune if I were not to see it. I will and must go in." Then faithful John saw that it was impossible to stop him, and thought to himself that he must fulfill his oath, though misfortune might come of it. So he unlocked the door and went in with him. The picture hung there, and it was the picture of the princess of the golden dwelling. When the king saw it, he fell to the ground as if struck by lightning. Faithful John lifted him up, carried him to his bed, and thought sorrowfully, "The misfortune has happened. Lord God, what will be the end of it?" Then he strengthened him with wine until he came to himself again. The first words which he spoke were, "Oh, the beautiful picture! Whose portrait is it?" "That is the princess of the golden dwelling," answered faithful John. Then the king said, "My love for her is so great that if all the leaves on the trees were tongues, they could not express it. I will risk my life to win her. You are my faithful John. You must stand by me." The faithful servant considered for a long time how the matter could be managed, for it was difficult even to get a sight of the princess. At last he devised a plan and said to the king, Everything which she has about her is of gold: tables, chairs, dishes, cups, bowls, and household furniture. In your treasury are 5 tons of gold. Let goldsmiths of the kingdom be set to work to make all sorts of vessels and implements, all kinds of birds and wild animals, wonderful beasts, that will please her." The king had all done that faithful John advised, and then the gold work was placed on a ship. Faithful John put on merchant's attire, and the king had to do the same, that they might appear quite unknown. Then they sailed across the sea, and sailed on and on, until they last came to the city where the princess of the golden dwelling lived. Faithful John told the king to stay in the ship, and said, "Perhaps I will bring the princess with me, only take care that everything is in order, and let the golden wares be well displayed." Then he loaded a boat with all sorts of golden things, took them on shore, and had them carried through the streets. When the people saw that, they all ran together and cried, "What wonderful golden wares!" And one said, "Such things as these have never yet been seen in our city." At last the news reached the princess, who said, "Such beautiful golden wares are being brought into the city that I must go and see them." She went out and saw faithful John, who was standing by his wares. She asked him, "Are these all yours?" "Yes," he answered, "they are all my wares for sale." She was delighted with them, and looked at them all, and at last said, "They are so beautifully made that I would like to buy them all together." Faithful John said, "I am only the servant of a rich merchant. What my mistress wishes to buy is nothing to what my master has on board the ship." The princess wished to go and see them, and faithful John led her to the ship. When she stepped on board, there stood the king in all his splendor, and was more handsome than anyone else. She was astonished, and said, "Who are you?" He answered, "I am a king." Then she fell in love with him, and they rejoiced together. But faithful John had overheard 3 ravens sitting on the mast and talking together. One said, "Yes, he has got the princess of the golden dwelling." The second said, "But he has still much to do." The third said, "He is in danger of losing his life." Then faithful John listened, and heard them say that when they landed, a chestnut horse would spring forward, and if the king mounted it, it would gallop away with him, and he would never be seen again, unless someone sprang up quickly and shot the horse dead. But whoever did that would be turned to stone from the toe to the knee. The second raven said that when they came to the castle, there would lie a bridal shirt in a dish, which looked as if it were woven of gold and silver, but was really sulfur and pitch. If the king put it on, it would burn him to the marrow of his bones. But whoever threw it into the fire would be turned to stone from the knee to the heart. The third raven said that when they went to bed, the queen would drink a cup of poisoned wine. If the king drank it, he would die. But whoever poured it away would be turned to stone from the heart to the mouth. Faithful John said to himself, "I can save my master, but it will cost me my life." When they landed, everything happened just as the ravens had foretold. The horse sprang forward. Faithful John leapt after it and shot it dead, and immediately his legs were turned to stone. Soon after that, the king wished to put on the beautiful bridal shirt, but faithful John snatched it away and threw it into the fire, and his body was turned to stone as far as the heart. At last, the king wished to drink the wine, but faithful John struck the cup from his hand and poured it away, and was turned wholly into stone. Then the king wept bitterly and said, "Ah, my faithful John, who has shown such great fidelity, must now stand here as stone." Afterwards, the king and queen lived happily together. One day, the queen said, "I am so grieved that faithful John stands there as stone." Then the king dreamed that if he sprinkled the stone with the blood of their 2 children, it would become alive again. The king was in great distress, but at last he did it. Faithful John came to life again, and the children were restored as well. Then they all lived happily together, and if they have not died, they are living still. The Good Bargain. A peasant drove his cow into the town, intending to sell her and get something for her which would bring him in more profit. He sold her for 7 thalers to a Jew. The Jew paid him, but as he did so, he said, "If the money makes a noise when it is put into your pocket, it is good silver, but if it makes none, it is bad." The peasant put the money into his pocket, and it made no noise. "Ah," said the Jew, "that is because it is good silver." The peasant went on his way, thinking he had made a good bargain. Soon afterwards he met another peasant, who was driving a fine horse. "Ah," said he, "what a beautiful horse! I wish I had such a one." "You may have him," said the other, "if you will give me 7 thalers for him." "7 thalers!" cried the first peasant joyfully. "That is just the sum I have." He gave the money, mounted the horse, and rode away, quite happy. After a short time, the horse began to stumble, and at last it fell and broke its leg. The peasant was obliged to kill it, and then went on his way sorrowfully. He soon met a butcher who was carrying a pig. "Ah," said the peasant, "if I had but that pig, it would be better than the horse." "You may have it," answered the butcher, "if you will give me 7 thalers." The peasant gave him the money, took the pig, and went on. After a little while, he met another man carrying a goose. "If I had that goose," thought the peasant, "it would be better than the pig." "You may have it," said the man, "if you will give me 7 thalers." The peasant gave him the money, took the goose, and went. Soon after that, he met a man carrying a grindstone. "Ah," thought the peasant, "if I had that grindstone, I could earn my living by it." "You may have it," said the man, "if you will give me 7 thalers." The peasant gave him the money, took the grindstone, and went. But the stone was very heavy, and as he went along he grew tired and thirsty. He came to a well and set the grindstone down by it. As he bent over to drink, the stone slipped and fell into the water. The peasant stood and looked at it, and then said joyfully, "I am so glad. I am free of the stone without any trouble. That was a good bargain indeed." Then he went home quite contented.
The Wonderful Musician. There was once a wonderful musician who went quite alone through a forest and thought to himself, "I have no companion. I must have someone with me." Then he took his fiddle and fiddled so that it resounded through the forest. It was not long before a wolf came out of the thicket and came towards him. "Oh," said the musician, "I do not want a wolf for my companion." Then he said to the wolf, "If you want to learn to fiddle, I will teach you." "Yes," answered the wolf, "I should like that very much. Teach me." The musician told him to lay his forepaws on a tree,
And when the wolf did so, he bound his paws fast to the tree with his fiddle strings and went his way. After a while, he met a fox. "Ah," thought he, "I would like a fox for my companion." Then he said to the fox, "If you want to learn to fiddle, I will teach you." "Yes," answered the fox, "I should like that." Then the musician said, "Lay yourself down behind me and put your forepaws together." The fox did so, and the musician bound his paws together with the fiddle strings and went on. Soon after that, he met a hare. "Oh," thought he, "a hare would suit me better." Then he said to the hare, "If you want to learn to fiddle, I will teach you." "Yes," answered the hare, "I should like that." The musician told him to hold up one of his legs, and while he was doing so, he bound him fast with the fiddle strings and went on. At last, he came to a village and fiddled at the entrance to it. The dogs heard it and ran barking towards him. The fiddler fiddled faster and louder, and all the dogs were forced to dance. The people came running out and cried, "Stop fiddling, you wonderful musician!" But he fiddled still louder, and they all began to dance, whether they would or not. At last the mayor came out and said, "If you do not stop fiddling, I will have you put in prison." Then the fiddler ceased, and the people stood still. They gave him a good meal and sent him away. When he had gone some distance, he thought, "I must see how my pupils are getting on." First, he came to the wolf, who was still bound to the tree. Then he came to the fox, who was still tied fast. Then he came to the hare, who was still bound. He released them all. They were very angry and would have fallen upon him. But the musician played again, and they were forced to dance until they were tired. Then he went on his way, and if he has not died, he is still wandering through the forest. The 12 Brothers. There were once a king and a queen who had 12 children, all boys, and said the king, "If the 13th child, which my wife is about to bring into the world, is a girl, the 12 boys shall die, that their riches may be divided among her." Then he caused 12 coffins to be made, filled them with shavings, and had them brought into a locked room, and gave the queen the key. Then he said to her, "If you bring a daughter into the world, you must open this room, and then the 12 boys must be put to death." The queen was sad at heart, and told no one of this. Now there was a poor maiden who was faithful to the queen, and she was told to keep watch. When the time came, the queen was delivered of a little daughter. Then the maiden ran quickly and told the king that the child was a girl. But the queen lay sick and faint and could not open the room. Then the maiden had pity on the 12 brothers, ran to the locked room, unlocked it, and showed the coffins to the 12 boys. She said, "Fly quickly, dear children, and never come back, or you will be put to death." The 12 brothers fled away into the forest and lived there. The queen, however, recovered, and the little daughter grew up and knew nothing of her brothers. One day the queen let fall a little gold band while she was dressing the king's hair. The king said, "That belongs to our daughter." Then the queen was afraid and asked the king if she might have her daughter with her. When the maiden heard this, she wept bitterly and said to the girl, "You must leave your father and mother and go seek your 12 brothers, or they must die." Then she gave her a little ring and told her where her brothers lived. The girl went into the forest and sought her brothers. At last she found a little house, and 12 chairs stood around a table. She sat down on the youngest chair. Soon after that, the 12 brothers came home. When they saw the girl, they said, "Who are you?" She answered, "I am your sister." They were very glad and kissed and embraced her. But the youngest said, "Dear sister, you must not stay here long. There is danger." "What danger?" she asked. "Our father," said he, "has sworn that if we should ever see a maiden, we must put her to death." They resolved to keep her hidden. But one day, while she was plucking flowers, she picked 12 lilies and broke them all in her hand. In the same moment, the 12 brothers were changed into 12 ravens. The little house vanished away, and the maiden stood alone in the forest. She wept bitterly and said, "How can I set my brothers free again?" Then an old woman came and said, "You must be dumb for 7 years, and must not speak or laugh, and must sew 7 shirts out of star flowers." The maiden did this. She climbed into a tree and sewed, and spoke not a word. A king came by and saw her. He took her for his wife. But when the 7 years were nearly over, the king's mother accused her falsely and said she had devoured her children. The king was grieved, but because she could not speak, she could not defend herself. At last she was condemned to be burned. As the fire was kindled, the 7 years were ended. The maiden threw the shirts over the ravens. They became men again, all except the youngest, who still had 1 wing. Then she spoke again and told everything. The king's mother was punished, and the brothers lived happily together with their sister. And if they have not died, they are living still.
The Pack of Ragamuffins. There was once a cock who had a hen, and the hen laid an egg every day. Now the cock said, "If you go on laying eggs every day, we shall become rich. You must lay eggs twice a day." The hen answered, "That is too much. I cannot do it." But the cock would not listen to her, and would not allow her any rest. So the hen became ill, and soon after died. Then the cock took another hen. But this hen also could not lay 2 eggs every day, and she died likewise. The cock took a third hen, and she also died. At last the cock said, "I will take no more hens." But one day the cock said to the hen, "Now you must lay eggs twice a day." She answered, "I cannot." Then the cock beat her to death. After that, the cock thought to himself, "I will go into the world and see what happens." So he set out on his travels. He met a cat. "Where are you going?" asked the cat. "I'm going into the world," said the cock. "I will go with you," said the cat. Then they went on together. They soon met a mouse. "Where are you going?" asked the mouse. "We are going into the world," answered the cock. "I will go with you," said the mouse. Then they went on. They met a duck, a pin, and a needle, and all went with them. At night they came to a house where robbers lived. The robbers were away. They went in and made themselves comfortable. The cock flew up on the roof. The hen sat on the hearth. The cat by the fire. The mouse ran about. The duck lay down. The pin stuck itself in the chair, and the needle hid itself in the bed. When the robbers came home, one sat down on the chair. The pin pricked him, and he cried out. Another lay down on the bed. The needle pricked him, and he cried out. The third went to the hearth, and the hen pecked him.
The cat scratched him, the mouse bit him, the duck quacked, and the cock crowed loudly from the roof. The robbers thought the house was haunted and fled away. Then the pack of ragamuffins lived happily in the house, and if they have not died, they are living still.
Brother and Sister. A little brother and sister were once left alone by their stepmother, who was a wicked witch. She led them into the forest and gave each of them a piece of bread and said, "Stay here until I come back." But she left them alone. When night came on, the brother said, "Sister, I am hungry." The sister answered, "Be quiet, dear brother, and wait until morning." But when morning came, the brother said again, "Sister, I am thirsty." The sister said, "Wait until we find a brook." They went on until they came to a little stream. The brother was about to drink, but the sister heard the brook murmur, "Whoever drinks of me will become a tiger." The sister cried, "Do not drink, brother, or you will become a wild beast." They went on and came to another stream. The brother was going to drink, but the sister heard it murmur, "Whoever drinks of me will become a wolf." "Do not drink," cried the sister. They went on still farther and came to a third brook. The brother was just about to drink, but the sister heard it murmur, "Whoever drinks of me will become a roe." The brother would not listen, but knelt down and drank. In the same moment he was changed into a roe. The sister wept bitterly and said, "Now I must never leave you." She tied her garter around his neck for a leash, and they went on together into the forest. At last they came to a little house. The sister cleaned it, and the roe lay quietly. Soon a king came riding by and saw the roe. He chased it, but it ran to the little house. The sister opened the door and said, "You shall not hurt my little roe." The king saw the maiden and was so struck by her beauty that he took her to his castle and married her. She lived happily with her little roe. But the wicked stepmother learned this and came to the castle. She gave the queen a poisoned drink, and the queen fell as if dead. The king wept bitterly. But at night the queen came back, nursed her child, and returned to the forest. This happened 3 nights. At last the king watched and saw her. The witch was seized and burned. Then the roe was changed back into a man, and brother and sister lived happily together. And if they have not died, they are living still.
Rapunzel. There were once a man and a woman who had long in vain wished for a child. At length the woman hoped that God was about to grant her desire. These people had a little window at the back of their house from which a splendid garden could be seen, which was full of the most beautiful flowers and herbs. It was, however, surrounded by a high wall, and no one dared to go into it, because it belonged to an enchantress who had great power and was dreaded by all the world. One day the woman was standing by this window and looking down into the garden. Then she saw a bed which was planted with the most beautiful rampion, Rapunzel, and it looked so fresh and green that she longed for it and had the greatest desire to eat some. This desire increased every day, and as she knew that she could not get any of it, she quite pined away and looked pale and miserable. Then her husband was alarmed and asked, "What ails you, dear wife?" "Ah," she replied, "if I cannot eat some of the rampion which is in the garden behind our house, I shall die." The man, who loved her, thought, "Sooner than let your wife die, bring her some of the rampion yourself, let it cost what it will." So in the twilight of evening he clambered down over the wall into the garden of the enchantress, hastily clutched a handful of rampion, and took it to his wife. She at once made herself a salad of it, and ate it greedily. It tasted so good to her, so very good, that the next day she longed for it 3 times as much before. If he was to have any rest, her husband must once more descend into the garden. In the gloom of evening, therefore, he let himself down again. But when he had clambered down the wall, he was terribly afraid, for he saw the enchantress standing before him. "How can you dare," said she with angry look, "to descend into my garden and steal my rampion like a thief? You shall suffer for it." "Ah," answered he, "let mercy take the place of justice. I only made up my mind to do it out of necessity. My wife saw your rampion from the window, and felt such a longing for it that she would have died if she had not got some to eat." Then the enchantress allowed herself to be softened, and said to him, "If the case be as you say, I will allow you to take as much rampion as you like, only I make one condition. You must give me the child which your wife will bring into the world. It shall be well treated, and I will care for it like a mother." The man, in his terror, consented to everything, and when the woman was brought to bed, the enchantress appeared at once, gave the child the name of Rapunzel, and took it away with her. Rapunzel grew into the most beautiful child under the sun. When she was 12 years old, the enchantress shut her into a tower, which lay in a forest, and had neither stairs nor door, but quite at the top was a little window. When the enchantress wanted to go in, she placed herself beneath the window and cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Rapunzel had magnificent long hair, fine as spun gold, and when she heard the voice of the enchantress, she unfastened her braided tresses, wound them round one of the hooks of the window above, and then the hair fell 20 ells down, and the enchantress climbed up by it. After a year or two, it came to pass that the king's son rode through the forest and passed by the tower. Then he heard a song which was so charming that he stood still and listened. This was Rapunzel, who in her solitude passed her time in letting her sweet voice resound. The king's son wanted to climb up to her, and looked for a door of the tower, but none was to be found. He rode home, but the singing had so deeply touched his heart that every day he went out into the forest and listened to it. Once, when he was thus standing behind a tree, he saw that an enchantress came there, and he heard how she cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Then Rapunzel let down the braids of her hair, and the enchantress climbed up to her. "If that is the ladder by which one mounts, I too will try my fortune," said he, and the next day, when it began to grow dark, he went to the tower and cried,
"Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Immediately the hair fell down, and the king's son climbed up. At first Rapunzel was terribly frightened, when a man, such as her eyes had never yet beheld, came to her. But the king's son began to talk to her quite like a friend, and told her that his heart had been so stirred that it had let him have no rest, and he had been forced to see her. Then Rapunzel lost her fear, and when he asked her if she would take him for her husband, and she saw that he was young and handsome, she thought, "He will love me more than old Dame Gothel does," and she said yes, and laid her hand in his. She said, "I will willingly go away with you, but I do not know how to get down. Bring with you a skein of silk every time that you come, and I will weave a ladder with it, and when that is ready I will descend, and you will take me on your horse." They agreed that until then he should come to her every evening, for the old woman came by day. The enchantress remarked nothing of this, until once Rapunzel said to her, "Tell me, Dame Gothel, how it happens that you are so much heavier for me to draw up than the young king's son." "Ah, wicked child," cried the enchantress, "what do I hear you say? I thought I had separated you from all the world, and yet you have deceived me." In her anger, she clutched Rapunzel's beautiful tresses, wrapped them twice round her left hand, seized a pair of scissors with the right, and snip, snap, they were cut off, and the lovely braids lay on the ground. And she was so pitiless that she took poor Rapunzel into a desert where she had to live in great grief and misery. On the same day that she cast out Rapunzel, the enchantress fastened the braids of hair which she had cut off to the hook of the window, and when the king's son came and cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair," she let the hair down. The king's son climbed up, but instead of finding his dearest Rapunzel, he found the enchantress, who gazed at him with wicked and venomous looks. "Aha!" she cried mockingly, "you would fetch your dearest, but the beautiful bird sits no longer singing in the nest. The cat has got her, and will scratch out your eyes as well. Rapunzel is lost to you. You will never see her again." The king's son was beside himself with pain, and in his despair he leaped down from the tower. He escaped with his life, but the thorns into which he fell pierced his eyes. Then he wandered quite blind about the forest, ate nothing but roots and berries, and did nothing but lament and weep over the loss of his dearest wife. Thus he roamed about in misery for some years, and at last came to the desert where Rapunzel, with the twins to which she had given birth, a boy and a girl, lived in wretchedness. He heard a voice, and it seemed so familiar to him that he went towards it. When he approached, Rapunzel knew him and fell on his neck and wept. 2 of her tears wetted his eyes, and they grew clear again, and he could see with them as before. He led her to his kingdom, where he was joyfully received, and they lived for a long time afterwards, happily and contented.
The 3 Little Men in the Wood. There was once a poor man who had a wife and a daughter. The wife died, and the man married again. The second wife also had a daughter. These 2 daughters were unlike each other in every respect. The poor man's daughter was beautiful and industrious, but the stepmother's daughter was ugly and idle. The stepmother hated the poor man's daughter because she was better and prettier than her own child. One day in winter, when everything outside was white with snow, the stepmother made the poor girl put on a thin paper dress and sent her out into the forest, saying, "Go and pick me a basketful of strawberries." The poor girl went into the forest. There were no strawberries to be found, for everything was covered with snow. She walked on and at last came to a little house. In it were 3 little men. She greeted them politely and asked if she might warm herself a little. The little men said, "Sit down, and if you will do what we tell you, you shall have good fortune." They asked her to sweep the house, make the beds, and shake the snow from the doorstep. She did everything willingly and carefully. Then they said, "Now sit down and eat with us." They gave her food, and she ate modestly. After that they said, "We will reward you." The first little man said, "You shall grow more beautiful every day." The second said, "Gold shall fall from your mouth whenever you speak." The third said, "A king shall come and take you for his wife." Then the poor girl thanked them and went home. As soon as she spoke, gold fell from her mouth. The stepmother and her daughter were astonished. Soon after that, the stepmother sent her own daughter into the forest, dressed warmly and gave her bread and cheese, and said, "Go and fetch me strawberries." The girl found the same little house. She greeted the little men roughly. They asked her to sweep the house, but she refused. They asked her to shake the snow from the doorstep, but she would not. They gave her food, but she ate greedily. Then the little men said, "We will reward you also." The first said, "You shall grow uglier every day." The second said, "A toad shall jump out of your mouth whenever you speak." The third said, "You shall die a miserable death." Then she went home. When she spoke, a toad sprang from her mouth. Soon after that, the king came riding through the forest and saw the poor girl. Gold fell from her mouth as she spoke. The king took her to his castle and married her. The stepmother and her daughter were filled with envy. They went to the castle and pretended friendliness, but the stepmother plotted evil. She caused the young queen to be thrown into the river and put her own daughter in the queen's place. But the true queen came back every night in the form of a white duck. She asked the king if he slept or watched. The cook told the king. On the third night, the king watched, and when the queen spoke, she became human again. The wicked stepmother and her daughter were punished, and the true queen lived happily with the king. And if they have not died, they are living still.
The Three Spinners. There was once a maiden who was lazy and would not spin, and no persuasion could induce her to do it. Now her mother scolded her so much that at last she was beside herself, and in her anger she beat her. Then the maiden cried aloud, and the queen passed by and heard her. She went in and asked the mother why she was beating her daughter so violently. The woman answered, "I cannot get her to leave off spinning. She wants to spin all day and night, and I am poor and cannot afford the flax." Then the queen said, "There is nothing I like better than to hear spinning. Let me have the maiden with me to the castle. I have plenty of flax." The mother was heartily glad, and the queen took the maiden with her. When they came to the castle, the queen led her into 3 rooms, which were filled from floor to ceiling with the finest flax. "Now spin me this flax," said she, "and when you have finished it, you shall have my eldest son for your husband, even if you are poor, for your industry shall make amends for everything." The maiden was terrified, for she could not spin, and she thought she must die of sorrow. She sat down and wept for 3 days without lifting a finger. On the 3rd day, the queen came and saw that nothing was done, but she thought that the maiden was ashamed. After the queen had gone, there came 3 women into the room. The first had a broad, flat foot. The second had a great hanging underlip, and the third had a broad thumb. They asked the maiden why she was crying. She told them her trouble. Then they said, "If you will invite us to your wedding, call us your cousins, and do not be ashamed of us. We will spin the flax for you." The maiden promised everything, and the 3 strange women sat down and spun, and in a short time the flax was all spun. When the queen came and saw it, she was astonished and kept her promise. The wedding was celebrated. The 3 women came and said, "We are cousins of the bride." The bridegroom asked how they came by their strange looks. The first answered, "From treading the treadle." The second said, "From licking the thread." The third said, "From twisting the thread." Then the king's son said, "I will never allow my beautiful wife to spin." And so the maiden was freed from spinning all her life. And if they have not died, they are living still.
Hansel and Gretel. Near a great forest there lived a poor woodcutter with his wife and his 2 children. The boy was called Hansel and the girl Gretel. He had little to bite and to break, and once, when great scarcity fell on the land, he could no longer procure even daily bread. Now when he was lying in bed at night and thinking over his troubles, and sighing and turning himself about, he groaned and said to his wife, "What is to become of us? How are we to feed our poor children when we no longer have anything even for ourselves?" "I will tell you what, husband," answered the woman. "Early tomorrow morning we will take the children out into the forest to where it is thickest. There we will light a fire for them and give each of them one more piece of bread, and then we will go to our work and leave them alone. They will not find the way home again, and we shall be rid of them." "No, wife," said the man, "I will not do that. How can I bear to leave my children alone in the forest? The wild animals would soon come and tear them to pieces." "Oh, you fool," said she. "Then we must all 4 die of hunger. You may as well plane the planks for our coffins." And she left him no peace until he consented. "But I feel very sorry for the poor children all the same," said the man. The 2 children had also not been able to sleep for hunger, and had heard what their stepmother had said to their father. Gretel wept bitterly and said to Hansel, "Now all is over with us." "Be quiet, Gretel," said Hansel, "and do not distress yourself. I will manage something." And when the old people had fallen asleep, he got up, put on his little coat, opened the door below, and slipped outside. The moon shone brightly, and the white pebbles which lay in front of the house glittered like real silver coins. Hansel stooped and filled his little pocket with them, and then went back and said to Gretel, "Be comforted, dear little sister, and go to sleep quietly. God will not forsake us." And he lay down again in his bed. When day dawned, but before the sun had risen, the woman came and awakened the 2 children. "Get up, you sluggards! We are going into the forest to fetch wood." Then she gave each of them a little piece of bread, and said, "There is something for your dinner, but do not eat it before then, for you will get nothing else." Gretel took the bread under her apron, as Hansel had the pebbles in his pocket. Then all set out together on the way to the forest. When they had walked a short time, Hansel stood still and peeped back at the house, and did so again and again. His father said, "Hansel, what are you looking at there? Pay attention and do not forget how to use your legs." "Ah, father," said Hansel, "I am looking at my little white cat which is sitting on the roof and wants to say goodbye to me." The woman said, "Fool, that is not your little cat. That is the morning sun shining on the chimneys." Hansel, however, had not been looking back at the cat, but had been constantly throwing one of the white pebbles out of his pocket on the road. When they had reached the middle of the forest, the father said, "Now, children, collect some wood, and I will light a fire, that you may not be cold." Hansel and Gretel gathered brushwood together, as high as a little hill. The brushwood was lighted, and when the flames were burning very high, the woman said, "Now, children, lay yourselves down by the fire and rest. We are going into the forest to cut wood. When we have done, we will come back and fetch you." Hansel and Gretel sat by the fire, and when noon came, each ate a little piece of bread, and as they heard the strokes of the wood axe, they believed that their father was near. But it was no wood axe, it was a branch he had tied to a withered tree, which the wind was blowing backwards and forwards. And as they had been sitting such a long time, their eyes closed with weariness, and they fell fast asleep. When they awoke, it was already dark night. Gretel began to cry and said, "Now how shall we get out of the forest now?" But Hansel comforted her and said, "Just wait a little, until the moon has risen, and then we shall soon find the way." And when the full moon had risen, Hansel took his little sister by the hand and followed the pebbles which shone like newly coined silver pieces, and showed them the way. They walked the whole night long, and by break of day came once more to their father's house. They knocked at the door, and when the woman opened it and saw that it was Hansel and Gretel, she said, "You naughty children, Why have you slept so long in the forest? We thought you were never coming back at all."
But the father rejoiced, for it had cut him to the heart to leave them behind alone. Not long after, there was again great scarcity, and the children once more heard their mother saying at night to their father, "Everything is eaten again. We have only half a loaf left, and that is the end. The children must go. We will take them deeper into the forest this time, so that they will not find their way out again. There is no other means of saving ourselves." The man's heart was heavy, and he thought, "It would be better for you to share the last mouthful with your children." But the woman would listen to nothing that he said, and scolded and reproached him. He who says A must say B likewise, and as he had yielded the first time, he had to do so a second time also. The children were still awake and had heard the conversation. When the old people had fallen asleep, Hansel again got up and wanted to go out and pick up pebbles, but the woman had locked the door, and Hansel could not get out. Nevertheless, he comforted his little sister and said, "Do not cry, Gretel. Go to sleep quietly. The good God will help us." Early in the morning, the woman came and took the children out of their beds. They received their little piece of bread, which was still smaller than the last time. On the way into the forest, Hansel crumbled his in his pocket, and often stood still and threw a crumb on the ground. "Hansel, why do you stop and look around?" said the father. "Go on." "I am looking at my little pigeon, which is sitting on the roof, and wants to say goodbye to me," answered Hansel. "Fool," said the woman, "that is not your little pigeon, that is the morning sun shining on the chimneys." Hansel, however, went on crumbling his bread and scattering the crumbs on the path. When they were deep in the forest, the father said, "Now, children, pile up some wood, and I will light a fire that you may not be cold." Hansel and Gretel gathered brushwood together, as high as a little hill. The brushwood was lighted, and when the flames were burning very high, the woman said, "Now, children, lay yourselves down by the fire and rest. We are going into the forest to cut wood. When we have done, we will come back and fetch you." Hansel and Gretel sat by the fire. When noon came, each ate a little piece of bread, but they heard no strokes of the axe, and when evening came, no one returned. They waited until it was dark night. Gretel wept bitterly, and Hansel said, "Just wait, Gretel, until the moon has risen." But when the moon rose, the crumbs were gone. The many thousands of birds which fly about in the woods and fields had picked them all up. Hansel said to Gretel, "We shall soon find the way." But they did not find it. They walked the whole night, and all the next day too, from morning till evening, but they did not get out of the forest. They were terribly hungry, for they had nothing to eat but a few berries which grew on the ground. And as they were so weary that their legs would carry them no longer, they lay down under a tree and fell asleep. It was now the third morning since they had left their father's house. They walked on again, but they could not get out of the forest, and if help did not come soon, they must die of hunger. At midday they saw a little bird sitting on a branch, which sang so beautifully that they stood still and listened to it. And when it had done singing, it spread its wings and flew on before them, and they followed it until they came to a little house, on the roof of which it perched. When they came close up to the house, they saw that it was built of bread, and had cakes for windows and sugar for the walls.
"We will set to work on that," said Hansel, "and have a good meal. I will eat a bit of the roof, and you, Gretel, can eat some of the window. It will taste sweet." Hansel reached up and broke off a little of the roof to try how it tasted, and Gretel leaned against the window and nibbled at the panes. Then a soft voice cried from the room within, "Nibble, nibble, gnaw! Who is nibbling at my little house?" The children answered, "The wind, the wind, the heaven-born wind," and went on eating without disturbing themselves. Hansel, who liked the roof, pulled down a great piece of it,
and Gretel pushed out the whole of one round window pane. Suddenly the door opened, and a woman as old as the hills, who supported herself on crutches, came creeping out. Hansel and Gretel were so terribly frightened that they dropped what they had in their hands. The old woman, however, nodded her head and said, "Oh, you dear children, who has brought you here? Do come in and stay with me. No harm shall happen to you." She took them both by the hand and led them into her little house. Then good food was set before them, milk and pancakes with sugar, apples, and nuts. Afterwards, two pretty little beds were covered with clean white linen, and Hansel and Gretel lay down in them and thought they were in heaven. The old woman had only pretended to be so kind. She was in reality a wicked witch who lay in wait for children and had built the little bread house merely to entice them there. When a child fell into her power, she killed it, cooked it, and ate it, and that was a feast day with her. The witches have red eyes and cannot see far, but they have a keen scent like animals and know when human beings are approaching. When Hansel and Gretel came near her house, she laughed maliciously and said mockingly, "I have them. They shall not escape me again." Early in the morning, before the children were awake, she got up, and when she saw them both sleeping peacefully, she muttered to herself, "That will be a dainty morsel." Then she seized Hansel with her shriveled hand, carried him into a little stable, and shut him in behind a grated door. Then she shook Gretel till she awoke, and cried, "Get up, lazy thing! Fetch water, and cook something good for your brother. He is in the stable outside, and is to be fattened. When he is fat enough, I will eat him." Gretel began to weep bitterly, but it was all in vain. She was forced to do what the wicked witch commanded her. And now the best food was cooked for poor Hansel, but Gretel got nothing but crab shells. Every morning the old woman went to the little stable and cried, "Hansel, stretch out your finger." Hansel stretched out a little bone, and the old woman, who had bad eyes, could not see it, and thought it was Hansel's finger, and wondered that he would not grow fat. When 4 weeks had gone by, and Hansel still remained thin, she was seized with impatience, and would not wait any longer. "Hullo, Gretel," she cried, "be quick and fetch some water. Be Hansel fat or lean, tomorrow I will kill him and cook him." Oh, how the poor little sister did lament when she had to fetch the water, and how her tears did flow down her cheeks. "Dear God, help us," she cried. "If only the wild beasts in the forest would devour us, then at least we should die together." "Just keep your whining to yourself," said the old woman. "It won't help you at all." Early in the morning, Gretel had to go out and hang up the kettle with water and light the fire under it. "We will bake first," said the old woman. "I have already heated the oven and kneaded the dough." She pushed poor Gretel out to the oven, from which flames of fire were already darting. "Creep in," said the witch, "and see if it is properly hot, so that we can put the bread in." And once Gretel was inside, she meant to shut the oven and bake her, and then eat her too. But Gretel saw what she had in her mind, and said, "I do not know how I am to do it. How do I get in?" "You silly goose," said the old woman. "The opening is big enough. See, I can get in myself." And she stooped and put her head into the oven. Then Gretel gave her a push that sent her far into it, and shut the iron door, and fastened the bolt. Oh, how the witch screamed when she felt the fire burn her, but Gretel ran away, and the godless witch was miserably burnt to death. Gretel at once ran to Hansel, opened his little stable, and cried, "Hansel, we are saved! The old witch is dead!" Then Hansel sprang out like a bird from its cage when the door is opened. How they did rejoice and embrace each other and dance about and kiss each other. And as they no longer had any need to be afraid, they went into the witch's house, and in every corner stood chests full of pearls and jewels. "These are far better than pebbles," said Hansel, and put as many into his pockets as would hold. And Gretel said, "I will take some too," and filled her apron full. "But now we must go away," said Hansel, "that we may get out of the witch's forest." After they had walked for some hours, they came to a great piece of water. "We cannot get over," said Hansel. "I see no footplank and no bridge." "And there is no boat either," answered Gretel, "but there is a white duck swimming there. If I ask her, she will help us over." Then she cried, little duck, here stand Gretel and Hansel. There's never a plank nor bridge in sight. Take us across on your white back." The duck came to them, and Hansel seated himself on its back, and told Gretel to sit close behind him. "No," answered Gretel, "that would be too heavy for the little duck. She must take us over one at a time." So the good little duck did, and when they were safely across and had walked for some time, the forest began to look more and more familiar to them, and at last they came to their father's house. They ran to the door, knocked at it, and when it was opened, they threw themselves into their father's arms. The man had not had one happy hour since he had left the children in the forest, but the woman was dead. Gretel shook her apron, and pearls and jewels fell out, and Hansel threw one handful after another out of his pockets. Then all their cares were at an end, and they lived together in perfect happiness. And if they have not died, they are living still. The 3 Snake Leaves. There was once a poor man who had 12 children and was forced to work day and night to procure them even daily bread. One day when he was working in the field, the king drove by and asked him who he was. "I am a poor man," he answered, "and have 12 children and must work hard to feed them." Then the king said, "I will take your youngest child with me. He shall fare well, and I will care for him." The poor man was glad, and let the child go with the king. The king brought him up and taught him hunting. When the boy had grown up, the king took him with him to war. When the army was encamped one night, the king's daughter fell dangerously ill, and a proclamation was issued that whoever could cure her should have her to wife and inherit the kingdom. Many tried, but no one could help her. At last the young huntsman said, "I will try." Though the king did not trust him much, he let him go to her. When he entered the room where the princess lay sick, he saw 3 snakes creeping out from under the bed. He cut off their heads and carried them away, but the princess died. The young man was much distressed and sat down by her body. Then he remembered the 3 snake leaves which lay by him. He put one leaf into her mouth and one on her heart. She began to move, breathed again, and soon came to life. The king was overjoyed and gave her to him for his wife and made him his heir. After some time, the young king went on a journey by sea and took his wife with him. They landed on an island. While he was asleep, she ordered her servants to throw him into the sea. She took another man and returned home, saying that her husband had died on the voyage. But the dead king was cast up on the shore of the island. A witch found him and restored him to life with the 3 snake leaves. He returned secretly to his kingdom. When he appeared, the false wife was seized and punished, and he lived long and happily with a faithful queen. And if they have not died, they are living still. The White Snake. A long time ago there lived a king who was famed for his wisdom through all the land. Nothing was hidden from him, and it seemed as if news of everything was brought to him secretly. But he had a strange custom. Every day after dinner, when the table was cleared and no one else was present, a trusty servant had to bring him one more dish. It was covered, however, and even the servant did not know what was in it. This dish remained covered until the king was alone. Then he uncovered it and ate. Now it happened one day that the servant could not restrain his curiosity any longer, and carried the dish into his chamber, locked the door, and lifted the cover. He saw a white snake lying in the dish. He could not resist tasting it, and cut off a little piece and put it into his mouth. No sooner had he done so than he heard a strange whispering of fine voices outside. He went to the window and listened. Then he noticed that it was the sparrows who were chattering together and telling each other of all sorts of things that had happened in the fields and woods. By eating the snake, he had obtained the power of understanding the language of animals. Now, on that same day, the queen lost her most beautiful ring, and suspicion fell on this servant, who was accused of having stolen it. The king ordered him to be brought before him and threatened him with death unless he confessed where the ring was. The servant, knowing his innocence, begged for 1 day's grace. The king granted it. The servant went out into the garden, and as he was pondering what he should do, he heard the ducks talking together. One said that it had swallowed something which lay by the water's edge and was very heavy. Then the servant made the duck be caught, and when it was opened, the queen's ring was found inside it. He carried the ring to the king, who acknowledged his innocence, but would not let him stay, and dismissed him from his service, giving him some money for the journey. The servant set out and wandered about for some time. At last he came to a great city and sought service. The king of the country had a beautiful daughter, but she was proud and had set a condition that whoever wished to marry her must perform a task, and whoever failed should lose his life. Many had already tried and perished. When the servant saw the princess, he loved her so dearly that he forgot all danger and presented himself before her. She led him to the sea and said, "I have thrown a golden ring into the water. Fetch it up again." He went down into the sea, but could not find the ring. He was about to come up again when he saw a fish swimming towards him. It held the ring in its mouth and laid it at his feet. He took it and carried it to the princess. She was angry that he had succeeded and set him a second task. She scattered 10 sacks of millet seed in the grass and said, "By tomorrow morning these must be picked up again and not a grain missing." The servant sat down sorrowfully, for he thought the task impossible. But at night he heard the ants talking together. The ant-king said, "Let us help the poor man." Early in the morning, before sunrise, the ants had gathered all the millet into the sacks. When the princess saw it, she was astonished, but still would not give in, and set him a third task. She led him into the forest, where 300 ravens lay. She said, "Kill these 300 ravens, and then you shall be my husband." The servant was in despair. Then he heard a whispering in the air, and the ravens said, "We will help you." They flew away, and came back with 3 apples from the tree of life. They said, "Give the princess one of these apples, and her pride will be humbled." The servant gave her an apple. When she had eaten it, her proud heart melted, and she loved him. They went together to her father, and the wedding was celebrated with great joy. And if they have not died, they are living still.
The straw, the coal, and the bean. There was once a poor old woman who lived in a little cottage. One day she had cooked some beans, and as she was about to take them out of the pot, she dropped one on the ground, and it lay there. At the same time, a straw lay on the floor, and a coal had fallen out of the fire and lay near it. The straw said, "Dear friends, from whence do you come?" The coal answered, "I have luckily escaped the fire, and if I had not done so by force, my death would have been certain. I should have been burnt to ashes." The bean said, "I too have escaped, but if the old woman had put me into the pot, I should have been cooked without mercy." The straw said, "I was destined to be burned in the fire, but I slipped away." Then the 3 agreed to flee together. They set out on their journey and soon came to a little brook. There was no bridge, and they did not know how to get across. The straw had an idea and said, "I will lay myself across, and you can go over on me as on a bridge." The straw stretched itself from one bank to the other. The coal walked over first, but when it came to the middle, it heard the water rushing beneath, became afraid, and stood still. The straw began to burn, broke in two, and fell into the water. The coal slipped in with it, hissed, and went out. The bean, who had stayed behind, burst out laughing so violently that it split its side. A tailor who happened to be passing by saw this, and out of compassion took a needle and sewed the bean together again. But because he used black thread, all beans since that time have had a black seam. And if they have not died, they are living still. The Fisherman and His Wife. There was once a fisherman who lived with his wife in a miserable little hut close by the sea. The fisherman went out every day and sat on the shore and fished on. One day, as he was sitting thus, his line went down very deep, and when he drew it up again, there was a great fish on the hook. The fish said to him, "Pray let me live. I am not really a fish, but an enchanted prince. What will it profit you to kill me? I should not taste good. Put me back into the water and let me go." "Oh," said the fisherman, "I have no need of many words about the matter. As you can speak, I will let you go." Then he put him back into the water, and the great fish swam away, making a long trail of blood behind him. The fisherman went home to his wife in the hut. "Husband," said the woman, "have you caught nothing today?" "No," said the man, "I caught a fish which said he was an enchanted prince, and I let him go." "Then did you not wish for anything?" said the wife. "No," said the fisherman, "what should I wish for?" "Oh dear," said the wife, "it is a sad thing to live always in this nasty hut. Do go back and ask the fish to give us a little cottage." The fisherman did not much like to do it, but he went to the sea. The water was quite green and yellow, and not so calm as before. He stood and said, "Flounder, flounder in the sea, come, I pray thee, here to me, for my wife, good Ilsebil, wills not as I'd have her will." Then the fish came swimming to him and said, "Well, what does she want then?" "Ah," said the fisherman, "my wife says that as I caught you, I ought to have wished for something. She does not like to live any longer in the nasty hut, and would like to have a little pottage. "Go home, then," said the fish. "She has it already." The fisherman went home and saw his wife standing before a neat little cottage. She was glad and said to him, "Do come in, see how much better this is." Everything inside was small but very pretty. They slept that night quite contentedly. Next morning, however, the wife woke first, and it was just daylight. She nudged the fisherman with her elbow and said, "Give up, husband, and look out of the window. Could we not be king?" "Oh, wife," said the man, "why should we wish to be king? I do not want to be king." "Well," said the wife, "if you will not be king, I will." "Good gracious," said the fisherman, "what do you want to be king for?" "Go to the fish," said the wife, "I will be king." "Alas, wife," said the fisherman, "that is not right. The fish will not do that." "Go, just go," said she. "I am king already. Go and ask." So the fisherman went, very unwillingly. The sea was dark green, and no longer so calm. He stood and said, "Flounder, flounder in the sea, come, I pray thee, here to me, for my wife, good Ilsebil, wills not as I'd have her will." "What does she want now?" said the fish. "Alas," said the fisherman, "my wife wants to be king." "Go home," said the fish, "she is king already." When the fisherman went home, he saw a great palace. His wife was standing on the steps with a crown on her head. She made him come up to her and said, "See, am I not a beautiful king?" "Oh, wife," said the fisherman, "now that you are king, what more do we want?" "I will think about that," said the wife. She lay down to sleep, but could not sleep for thinking what she would be. Next morning she said, "Husband, I am king, and you are my husband, but I am not content. I will be emperor." "Oh, wife," said the fisherman, "that is too much. You cannot be emperor." "Husband, go to the fish. I am king, and I want to be emperor." "Oh, dear," said the fisherman, "the fish will not do that. An emperor is above all kings." "Go at once," said the wife. "I am king, and you are my husband." So he went. The sea was black and troubled, and a strong wind was blowing. He stood and said, "Flounder, flounder in the sea, come, I pray thee, here to me, for my wife, good Ilsebil, wills not as I'd have her will." "What does she want now?" said the fish. "Alas," said the fisherman, "my wife wants to be emperor." "Go home," said the fish. "She is emperor already." When the fisherman went home, he saw a still greater palace, with marble steps and golden doors. His wife sat on a throne of gold, with a great crown on her head. "Oh, wife," said the fisherman, "now that you are emperor, what more can you wish for?" "I will think about it," said the wife. She lay down, but could not sleep. She thought and thought. At last she said, "I am emperor, but I am not content. I will be pope." "Oh, wife," said the fisherman, "you cannot be pope." "Husband, go to the fish. I want to be pope." So he went again. The sea now was quite dark gray and tossed about violently. He stood and said, "Flounder, flounder in the sea, come, I pray thee, here to me, for my wife, good Ilsebil, wills not as I'd have her will." "What does she want now?" said the fish. "Alas," said the fisherman, "my wife wants to be pope." "Go home," said the fish. "She is pope already." When he went home, he saw his wife sitting on a very high throne, with 3 crowns on her head. "Oh, wife," said the fisherman, "now that you are pope, what more can you wish for?" "I will think about it," said the wife. She lay down, but could not sleep. She thought and thought. At last she said, "I am pope, but I am not content. I want to be like God." "Oh, wife," said the fisherman, "that is too much. You cannot be like God." "Husband, go to the fish. I want to be like God." So he went once more. The sea was black and furious, and the wind howled, and the waves rose like mountains. He stood and said, "Flounder, flounder in the sea, come, I pray thee, here to me,
For my wife, good Ilsebil, wills not as I'd have her will." "What does she want now?" said the fish. "Alas," said the fisherman, "my wife wants to be like God." "Go home," said the fish. "She is sitting in her old hut again." Then the fisherman went home and found his wife sitting in the miserable little hut again, and there they live to this very day. The Brave Little Tailor. One summer morning, a little tailor sat on his table by the window, sewing with all his might. He was in good spirits and sewed away with right good courage. Then there came a peasant woman down the street crying, "Good jams to sell, good jams to sell." That rang pleasantly in the tailor's ears. He put his head out of the window and called, "Come up here, dear known woman, here you will get rid of your wares." The woman came up the 3 flights of stairs to the tailor, and he made her unpack all her pots for him. He looked at them all, lifted them up, put them down, and at last said, "The jam looks good to me. Weigh me out 4 ounces of it, dear woman, and if it be 1/4 of a pound, that won't matter." The woman, who had hoped to find a good customer, gave him what he wanted, but went away quite angry and murmuring. "Now may God bless the jam to my use," cried the little tailor, "and give me strength and courage." He fetched bread out of the cupboard, cut a slice off the loaf, spread the jam over it, and said, "This won't taste bitter, but I will just finish the jacket before I take a bite." He laid the bread aside, went on sewing, and in the meantime the smell of the sweet jam rose up to the wall where great numbers of flies were sitting, and attracted them. "Hullo!" cried the little tailor. "Who invited you?" And without more ado he fetched the cloth which lay by him, and swished it right and left among them. When he stopped and counted, there lay no fewer than 7 dead, with legs stretched out stiff. "Are you fellows like that?" he said. "7 at one blow? That's something to boast of." The town must hear of this, so the little tailor cut himself a belt, stitched it, and embroidered on it in large letters, 7 at one blow. "What, the town?" he continued. "The whole world shall hear of it." And his heart beat with joy like the tail of a lamb. The little tailor put on his belt and made up his mind to go out into the world, because he thought his workshop too small for his valor. Before he went, he looked about him to see if there was anything in the house that he could take with him, but he found nothing but an old cheese, which he put in his pocket. Before the door he noticed a bird which had caught itself in the bushes. This he stuffed into his pocket with the cheese. Now he set out on his way boldly, and as he was light and nimble, he felt no fatigue. After he had walked for some time, he came to the top of a mountain, and there sat a mighty giant, looking peacefully about him. The little tailor went bravely up to him, spoke to him, and said, "Good day, comrade. You are sitting there surveying the wide world. I'm just on my way there, and am going to try my luck. Will you go with me?" The giant looked contemptuously at the tailor and said, "You ragamuffin, you miserable creature." "Oh, indeed," answered the tailor, unbuttoning his coat and showing the giant his belt. "Here you may read what kind of a man I am." The giant read 7 at one blow, and thought that meant men whom the tailor had killed. He felt a little respect for the tiny fellow, and wished first to try him. He took a stone and squeezed it so hard that water dripped out of it. "Do that likewise," said the giant, "if you have the strength." "Is that all?" said the tailor. "That is child's play with us." He put his hand into his pocket, took out the cheese, and squeezed it until the whey ran out. "I should like to see you do better than that," he said. The giant was astonished and did not know what to say. Then he took up a stone and threw it so high that it was soon out of sight. "Now, little tailor, do that." "Well thrown," said the tailor, "but after all the stone came down to earth again. I will throw you one which shall never come back." He put his hand into his pocket, took out the bird, and threw it into the air. The bird, glad to be free, rose, flew away, and did not come back. "How does that shot please you, comrade?" asked the tailor. "You can throw," said the giant, "but now we will see if you can carry anything heavy." He led the tailor to a mighty oak which lay felled on the ground, and said, "If you are strong enough, help me to carry the tree out of the forest." "Certainly," answered the little tailor. "Take the trunk on your shoulder, and I will lift the branches and twigs. They are the heaviest." The giant took the trunk on his shoulder, but the tailor sat himself down on one of the branches and let the giant carry the whole tree, branches and all. The giant, who could not see behind him, could do nothing but trudge along and grumble, "What a heavy tree!" The little tailor sat behind and was quite at his ease, and called out merrily, "See how easy it is! Why, I could carry 2 such trees." At last the giant could go no farther, let the tree fall, and said, "You are a powerful fellow." They went on together until they came to a cherry tree. The giant seized the top of it where the ripest fruit hung, bent it down, and held it in the tailor's hand, who was to eat. But the tailor was too light, and when the giant let go, he sprang into the air and fell down without being hurt. "That is nothing," said the tailor, "but you must be weak if you cannot do that." The giant grew angry and led the tailor to his cave, where other giants sat by the fire. Each had a roasted sheep in his hand and was eating it. The little tailor looked about and thought, "It is much roomier here than in my workshop." The giant pointed to the sheep and said, "Eat and strengthen yourself." But the tailor thought it too big and said, "I am not used to such great bites." The giants laughed scornfully, and one of them fetched an iron bar and broke it in 2 with his bare hands. "Do that if you have strength," said he. The tailor took the bar, but put it secretly under his arm and bent it so that it seemed to be broken, although it was not. Then the giants fetched a stone and asked him to squeeze water out of it. The tailor did as before with the cheese. At last one of the giants said, "Here is a test for you. Take this apple tree and pull it out of the ground." The tailor pretended to exert himself, but instead climbed quickly up the tree, shook it so that the apples fell down, and then sprang lightly to the ground. The giants were now convinced of his strength, and said, "You shall be our chief." But the tailor did not like that, and went on his way. After he had gone a long way, he came to the courtyard of a king's palace. Being tired, he lay down on the grass and fell asleep. While he lay there, people came and read on his belt, 7 at one blow. "Ah," said they, "what does this great warrior want here in the midst of peace? He must be a mighty lord." They went to the king and told him, and gave it as their opinion that if war should break out, this man would be a very important and useful person, and on no account should be allowed to depart. The king sent for the little tailor and offered him a place in his army. But the tailor thought to himself, "I am not cut out for that," and demanded that before he would enter the king's service, he should rid the kingdom of 2 giants who lived in the forest, laid waste the land, carried off cattle and men, and could not be restrained by anyone. The king was glad to do this, and promised him his only daughter in marriage and half the kingdom as a reward. The tailor went into the forest, and the 2 giants soon saw him and lay down to sleep under a tree. The tailor climbed up and waited until they were both snoring. Then he took stones and threw them at one of the giants. The giant awoke and cried to the other, "Why are you striking me?" "I am not striking you. Let me alone." They fell asleep again, and the tailor threw a stone at the second. "What is the meaning of this?" cried the second. "Why are you pelting me?" "Do not accuse me falsely," said the first. They disputed for a time, but being tired, laid their heads down and slept again. Then the tailor repeated the game, until at last they grew so angry that they rushed at each other, seized heavy trees, and beat each other so violently that they both fell down dead. The tailor came forth and said, "It is lucky I did not cut down the tree under which they lay, or it would have fallen on my head, but now I am free." He went back to the king and said that he had done the work required of him. The king was unwilling to give him his daughter and half the kingdom, and invented another task. A unicorn was doing great harm in the forest. The tailor was to catch it. "I fear no unicorn," said the tailor, "7 at one blow." He took an axe and rope and went into the forest. When the unicorn rushed at him, he sprang quickly behind a tree. The unicorn ran against it with all its might and stuck its horn so fast in the trunk that it could not get loose. "Now I have caught the bird," said the tailor, came behind the tree and tied the unicorn fast. Still the king delayed his promise and demanded a third task. There was a wild boar in the forest that made great havoc. The tailor was to kill it. The tailor lured the boar into a chapel, sprang out through a window, and shut the door upon the boar, which could not get out again. Then he killed it. Now the king could no longer refuse what he had promised. The tailor married the king's daughter and became king. But the young queen heard her husband talking in his sleep at night. "Boy, make me the doublet and patch the breeches, or I'll thump you with the yard measure." Then she knew what sort of man she had married, and complained to her father, begging him to help her. The king promised help, and one night had armed men stand by the tailor's bed, who were to bind him and carry him away. But the tailor awoke and cried, "7 at one blow! I slew 2 giants, killed a unicorn, caught a wild boar, and you think I am afraid of you who stand there by my bed?" When the men heard that, they were so frightened that they ran away and never came back. Thus the little tailor remained king and was honored and feared as long as he lived.